Hi everyone and welcome to another video. Today Maddie and I wanted to go ahead and show you all of the books that we read in both January and February. Since we haven't read as much this year as we have done before, we just thought we would put the months together, and I think we both have around 10-ish. I've got 8. I'm just going to start with my first book, which was Lady Susan, the Watson, and Sanditon by Jane Austen, and these are 3 short/unfinished stories, and I gave this book 3.5 stars, I think. I really enjoyed Lady Susan. I honestly can't remember what the story was, but I do remember liking it, and it was like a little bit difficult to follow along. Like, they don't really tell you who's who in the book, you just kind of gotta figure it out as you go. But the other 2 stories, I definitely wasn't paying attention as much, and I kind of lost some details, and they weren't as good for me personally, but I did enjoy it, and I was happy to say I've read it and am a little bit closer to having read all of her books.
So the first book that I read is Nettle and Bone by T. Kingfisher, and I listened to this one, and I had no idea what it was, but I just needed something to listen to. So this is a fantasy, and it's about this princess who is like the younger princess. She goes to become like a nun, or she lives in a convent, but then she eventually has to try to rescue her sister. In the beginning, there was some more like adultish content that I didn't really like. I didn't really like where the book was going, but then it kind of changed and it got a little better. Definitely wasn't my favorite book, but it wasn't bad, and I did enjoy it, and I liked the storyline. The beginning was just a bit rough for me.
Next, I read The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by Suzanne Collins, which is the which is the sequel to the Hunger Games series. Which is the prequel to the Hunger Games series, and so it basically follows the villain of the story, Coriolanus Snow, and all of the characters that, like, some of them you see in the original books. And so I actually enjoyed this a lot more than the original books. They were never my favorite. I feel like the reviews I was reading of this book were all pretty bad. It's kind of a book that a lot of people didn't like, so I wasn't really sure what to think going in, and people kind of were talking about how they hated reading about such a horrible character because the internal monologue and all of the stuff going on was just so horrible. And I don't know if there's just something wrong with me, but I did not see it. Kind of felt like I was just reading about normal characters up until about the end. The thing I really liked about this book is that the world felt more normal, more just like normal characters just trying to figure out how to live their lives. And that seems weird since it's set during a time when the Hunger Games is going on, but it was more of like, I don't know, you got a grip of the setting and the characters, and I just vibed with these characters more. So overall, I enjoyed this more than I expected to, just judging by reviews.
Okay, the next book I read is The Boys in the Boat, 9 Americans in Their Epic Quest for Gold at the 1936 Berlin Olympics by Daniel James Brown. So long, okay. So this is a biography of all of the rowers in the American rowing team, and I really loved this book. It was so engaging and interesting and extremely sad. It really inspired me and encouraged me, and I just really enjoyed the whole reading process of this. I'm just not a huge nonfiction person, but this one I just couldn't put down, so I would highly recommend reading this book.
I'm just going to clump the next 3 books together, which I have 3 of the Giver Quartet series, and that is The Giver, Gathering Blue, and Messenger. I think I talked about these in one of our vlogs because I was listening to them, and I kind of just sped through the series. Maddie read it in December of last year, I think, so I just kind of was like, that might be a good idea for me to reread as well, and I really, really enjoyed this reread of the series. It's such a classic with so many good and deep messages to think about, and characters that you really relate to and understand. And even though there's so many different things going on in this society than our own, there's actually a lot of similarities and a lot of different themes you can get from these books, and I would highly recommend this series for like middle grade and beyond. You can't be too old for them.
Okay, the next book I read is another T. Kingfisher book, another one I listened to, and it's Wizard's Guide to Defensive Baking. I saw Chantel reading this one. She liked it, so I decided to try it, and I thought it was Good. It's a more of like a middle grade, and it's another fantasy book where there are like wizards, and there are different levels of wizards. So this is a very lowly baking wizard. She can make her baking be better, so she can like make bread rise and make things not burn and stuff like that. So there is a murder in the bakery, and so that is where this, I can't remember how old she is, she's like 12 or 14 or something like that. This baker is involved in this murder, and she is like taken to the castle, and all this stuff happens, and I really like this. I really liked the first half of the book. I was listening to it, and once we got halfway, I was like, wow, there's the end. I thought it was like over, and no, there was a lot left. So I think it was a little bit shorter. I don't think it was even that long of a book, but it was like, first half was great, and then it just kind of dragged on, and there was like a war.
Next, I read the infamous Chasing the White Lion by James R. Hannibal. I talked about this in our vlog, again, a lot, so I'm not going to go into lots of details on what I thought about this. So I think I ended up giving this 2 stars, and basically it's about this like jungle of, there's a word for them. They're like bad guys, I don't know. A jungle of bad guys, and the good guys are trying to stop them. So yeah, that's about it, and I am unhauling this. Just whenever we go to the thrift store or any way I can get rid of it, I will get rid of it.
The next book I read is The Swiss Family Robinson by Johann David Weiss. So the next book that I read is The Swiss Family Robinson by Johann David Weiss, and we were vlogging when I read this, so I do talk about this a lot more in that vlog if you want to check it out, but I didn't really enjoy this. I think I gave it 2 stars, yeah, and it was a struggle to get through this book.
And then I just finish up to my Giver series. My first time reading it, this was my favorite out of the series, and I think it still is. This one follows Claire on her journey to just trying to escape her life, and then trying to find her son, which is what this book is about. I hate leading up to the end, because it's like, oh no, what's happening? Why is she making these choices? But then it all works out. I guess that's a spoiler, but it works out.
I don't know if it all works out, but
no,
it's a good ending. So a good ending to the whole quartet. Yeah. So the next book is one that I listened to, and it was Poirot Investigates by Agatha Christie, and I think this is like the 3rd book in the Poirot series, and I did not enjoy this one as much, mostly because it was short stories, and I can't even remember exactly what the short stories were, but I just prefer Agatha Christie's full books, and so yeah, I still liked it because it's Agatha Christie, and it was interesting because Poirot was so young, it seems. I don't know how old he was, but it was like way earlier than most of the Poirot books that I've read, so it was more interesting there, but it was just a little bit boring with just the short stories.
Next I read Farmer Boy by Laura Ingalls Wilder, which is book 2 in The Little House on the Prairie. Is that what it's called?
Really? Book 2?
Yeah. Anyway, this is book 2, and I gave this one 3 stars, I think. I did really enjoy reading it and kind of like seeing what it was like to be a farmer in the, I think like 1870s, that could be wrong. Yeah, I just loved, it was simple, it was a nice story, and I feel like I did learn a lot. I was very immersed in this culture and time.
The next book that I read is Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier, and I read half, and then I had to read some other stuff, and then I finished it. So the first half, I was so confused, and I had no idea what was happening. It was beautifully written, and I kind of liked the idea, but I was just like, I don't know what's happening. It has a trope I don't love, which is like, they see each other and then they get married immediately, and he's so much older. It just kind of made me not like it. Once I came back to it, it got really interesting. It was so suspenseful, and I definitely really liked it. It's not like my favorite book in the world, which I feel like a lot of people really love this book. But I did really enjoy it. It's about this girl who marries this older guy who lives in this huge house, and something happened to his wife. She died. There's like a big mystery, and we never even learn the main character's name. It's very interesting and suspenseful, but very strange.
Next I read The List by Patricia Forty, and I read this for the Alphabet Round Table read, that literary why is that so hard? Literary Gladiators was putting on, and I think I gave this 3 stars. It was an interesting book. I was happy to read it because it had been on my shelf for a really long time, and it was one of those books that just never caught my interest enough to actually pick it up. I enjoyed it because it had some interesting messages. I also didn't enjoy it for that reason because some of the messages were interesting, and I didn't really know what to think. So I don't really know if this is worth keeping on my shelf, but for now, I will be holding on to it, and it was just one I had some mixed thoughts on.
The next book that I read is The Chosen by Haim Potok, and this is also the book for the Alphabet Roundtable read that I read. So both of those are going to have like a more in-depth video that you can go watch. It's going to be out by the time this video goes out. So I love this book a lot. It was kind of surprising to me that I really enjoyed it, because Amelia had read it. You had described it to me, and I'm going to be honest, it sounded horrible. But this is about 2 Jewish communities and a friendship between 2 boys from those different communities at the end of World War II and just after it.
Yeah, I was surprised you liked it that much too, because
I tabbed so many things.
She was like flying through it. And lastly, I read Wives and Daughters by Elizabeth Gaskell. This is a thick book, and it explains why my February reading month was a little bit lower than it has been before. So this, I read this for the Read Your Bookshelf Challenge because I had to read a book over 400 pages, and I'm really glad I did. I actually really enjoyed this book. It didn't feel long. It was long, but also I kind of felt like, wow, I'm almost done. So this follows... How do I read a book this big and then forget the characters' names? Molly. This follows Molly Gibson, and she is the daughter of the town doctor, and she basically has this fear that the town puts in her head that her father might remarry one day because her mother had died, and that fear ends up coming true. He gets married to Mrs. Kirkpatrick, who has a daughter, and Mrs. Kirkpatrick is an interesting character. She isn't a bad person, but she's definitely not a good person, and she puts on this persona of really caring about Molly, but when really she just kind of wants to get her way, and she wants to change the family to fit the ideals that she has. But Molly and Cynthia, who is her daughter, get along really well, and Molly is really good friends with the Hamleys, who have 2 boys, and you kind of just see all of their friendships between the 4 of them. I really, really did like this. It's not finished. I think she only had like a couple chapters left before she died. It's still really good. I still felt like it concluded well, and I would definitely recommend this.
I am just really impressed that you read that. I was like, oh my gosh, she's behind. Oh no, she's behind again, and somehow you finished it a few days early. So
I did get behind several times.
But that was pretty impressive. Okay, well, my book's not as impressive because I had to read a book under 250, and so I read The Clocks by Agatha Christie. Perot is like barely in this book, which is very interesting. I didn't know, so like I had never heard anything about this book before, and it was just, I had bought it. I bought 4 of these like collections from a thrift store, and so this was the one I hadn't read from it, and I didn't know if it was a Perot book because it doesn't say anywhere on it. Like they're usually like Perot number 31 or whatever. So I didn't know, and he didn't come in until like halfway. So I was like, is this one? I don't know. So he is like really old. This is like in the 60s, I think. Yeah, 1963. You can definitely tell by the descriptions of people. This starts off with a murder, of course. This girl was called to go to, she's a typist. She like types things for people. And so she was called by specifically her to go to this house, and if no one answers the door, she's just supposed to go inside. So she does that, no one answers, so she goes inside, and she finds this body, and then this old blind lady walks in who's the owner of the house, and so yeah, that's kind of the setting of the scene, and then there are these like clocks that no one has any idea why they're there. So this has kind of 2 points of view. So there is the detective who's on the case, and then there's this other guy who's younger he's like a secret agent or something. I don't know. I can't really remember. But, and he knows Perot, and he kind of goes to him, and he's like old and in his chair, and he just like stays at home and reads and stuff. and he's very bored, so he brings this case to him to be kind. But I really enjoyed this. I liked that it was different, and it had the 2 points of view, and one was in third person and one was in first person, so that was kind of interesting. Yeah, I really enjoyed this one. So that was everything that we read in January and February. I read quite a few books that I owned, which made me really excited, and really excited for the rest of the year because I just feel like I'm going to be reading a lot of books on my shelf. We hope you enjoyed this video. We want to thank you so much for watching, and we will see you in the next one.